Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 9 a.m. roundtable on gender. We're going to have what I hope is going to be a very productive discussion this morning. We have three presenters to talk to us about three different but very obviously related topics, so I'm really excited to get started with that. I am the moderator for this session. My name is Zachary Idala. I am the honors director at Bloomfield College in New Jersey. So what I think we'll do is have each presenter begin, and if you have any questions that you'd like them to address as they go through their the ideas that they present to us, feel free to type those in the chat, and then we can go through them when each presenter has gone through what they want to open up for discussion. We can do it that way. But of course, if we're a small enough group, I think it'll be fine if you just unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask a question. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to hear from Irene first, who is going to be talking to us about ending non-consensual surgeries on intersex individuals, and she is from Ramapo College. So please take it away, Irene.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Is that okay?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So my name is Irene Vilgorin, and I'm a biology major at Ramapo College, and I'll be presenting on intersex individuals. Okay, so what is intersex? So according to the Intersex Society of North America, intersex is a general term that is used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of female or male. And another term for intersex is hermaphrodite, or also it is referred to as DSD, which is disorders of sexual development. So how common is intersex? At least 1 out of 2,000 babies is born intersex. And as of 2018, there are an estimated 129 million intersex people in the world, or 1.7% of the global population of 7.6 billion. And that is about the same amount of people with red hair. So the amount of people with red hair that you could be seeing on a daily basis, you could be seeing the same amount of people who are intersex and simply not be aware of that. And the type of surgeries that are performed on intersex individuals are reducing or cutting off of an enlarged clitoris, which is termed a clitorectomy, constructing a vagina, which is called a vaginoplasty, and removal of gonads, which are called gonadectomies. In regards to the removal of gonads, that's typically done for an intersex condition that is called AAS, androgen insensitivity syndrome. I will go into more specific details about it in the next slides. But basically, individuals with that condition, they have abdominal testes, and there's usually a risk that they may develop cancer as a result of this. So that's why doctors sometimes recommend that the removal of gonads occurs. However, the surgery is very invasive and it can be postponed until later. So because it isn't an imminent health risk, so it could be postponed until a later time. And also in regards to the cutting off of an enlarged clitoris, that is typically done for individuals who have CAH, which is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And again, I will discuss more specifically what that condition is as well. But basically, as a result of these kind of procedures, a lot of people, they complain that they lose any sensation in their clitoris, and like it really negatively impacts the sexual function and their sexual lives. So it's very damaging, like these surgeries they do that are non-consensual. And then in regards to constructing a vagina, which is a vaginoplasty, they also typically do that for individuals who have congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And the risk with that is that sometimes even after they reconstruct the vagina by making it larger, for instance, stenosis can happen where it can close again, and then you have to keep doing the procedure to try to widen it. And sometimes, like 36% of the time, you have to then undergo the operation again to like construct it again and make it bigger again. So that can also be very damaging and just difficult to deal with. So all of these surgeries, they're usually non-consensual, and that is the focus of the discussion. And that's really negative because a lot of people don't have a say in the fact that these surgeries are performed on them. Okay, so typical sexual development. So essentially, we have 46 sets of chromosomes, and 23 are from our mom and 23 are from our dad. And 22 are identical to each other and are called autosomes. And then the 23rd pair of chromosomes are the sex chromosomes. And typically in the neonatal physiological development, girls' and boys' reproductive organs and genitalia, they come from the same basic structures, as you can see in this diagram. So for instance, the Mullerian ducts that you can see here, the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, and the uterus, they form from these Mullerian ducts. And from the Wolffian ducts, the testes form. And then also there is a structure that is called the genital tubercle, which is shown right here. And basically from the genital tubercle, it's bipotential, and then depending on the amount of hormones you receive, whether you receive more estrogen or more testosterone, you will develop a clitoris or a penis, which is also shown here. And this image basically further exemplifies what I just stated, showing the genital tubercle right here, and that if you are a female and you have more estrogen, you will develop a clitoris, but if you're a male and you have more testosterone, you will develop a penis. Okay, and so basically, there are many different intersex conditions. There are a plethora of gradations when it comes to intersex, but the ones that I will be discussing predominantly are Klinefelter syndrome, androgen insensitivity syndrome, and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And with Klinefelter syndrome, basically, it's an intersex condition where you are technically, you're genotypically a male, so you have the XY chromosomes, but you have an extra X, so you could have, for instance, 47XXY, and as a result of this, feminization of your physical body occurs, and you could develop breasts. So you could develop like some breasts as well, and you could just develop more feminine features. And typically these individuals are sterile as a result of this. With androgen insensitivity syndrome, which is AIS, is basically a variation of intersex that occurs in chromosomal and gonadal males. And in this condition, the individual lacks key androgen receptors, and as a result is unable to respond to testosterone. So even though this individual has XY chromosomes, because they can't respond to testosterone, feminization of their physique occurs. They could develop round breasts, and they're also sterile, and they develop the abdominal testes. So typically individuals that have androgen insensitivity syndrome, because they have these abdominal testes, it is recommended for them to get those testes removed because they could become cancerous. But as I stated previously, it isn't an imminent health risk, and it can be postponed until a later time where they can come to the decision themselves on whether they want to have the surgery done on them or not. And so basically, the next intersex condition is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And in regards to this is when the adrenal glands, which are located on top of your kidneys, they don't function properly. And so as a result, they produce damaging levels of testosterone. So even though you are chromosomally, you are female and you have XY chromosomes, because you have so much testosterone in your body, you have more masculine features, and it can sometimes result in an enlarged clitoris. And in this case, you would need to, doctors typically recommend getting a clitorectomy, which is when they reduce or simply cut off your clitoris. And this can really negatively impact sexual function of the individual. And that is why all of these procedures that are done on these intersex individuals, they're very, very negative. And they, like most people who undergo these procedures, down the line, they're very unhappy, and psychologically, it's just really negatively impacts them. So, and then the individuals that are on the bottom are individuals that I discovered from a documentary that I watched called Secret Intersex. It can be found on YouTube, so I strongly recommend that you guys watch it. It's really cool. And the parents of these individuals were raising these children, and basically these children have androgen insensitivity syndrome. So despite the fact that chromosomally they are male and they have XY chromosomes, because of the fact they lack key androgen receptors, their body cannot respond to testosterone, and as a result, they appear to be a bit more feminine, and they have abdominal testes. And in the documentary, they were explaining that their parents decided not to undergo any invasive procedures and not to remove their gonads, not to remove their abdominal testes, because they thought that it was too invasive and they should decide for themselves. And neither of the individuals wanted to undergo the surgery, because the thing is, after your gonads get removed, you have to be on lifelong hormone replacement therapy, which can be extremely expensive and inconvenient, and other issues can result as well. If you don't have necessary hormones, you can get osteoporosis and things like that. So it's ended up being a good thing that they decided not to undergo these invasive procedures. So now basically in this part of the presentation, I will discuss several different cases of intersex individuals. So one case is PIDGEON PAGONIS, and basically PIDGEON, she has AIS, androgen insensitivity syndrome. And basically what was done with her is that she had abdominal testes as a result of this condition, because despite the fact that she was chromosomally male, so she had XY chromosomes, because she lacked key androgen receptors, the body didn't respond to testosterone, and as a result, PIDGEON appeared to be more feminine, as you can see in the image below. And so what happened to her was that doctors removed her gonads, and this was all done non-consensually when she was really little. And then they also tried to reduce her clitoris, but they basically hacked away at it until there was nothing left. And so she lost all sexual sensation in her clitoris, and that really negatively impacted her sexual life. And they also made her vaginal opening bigger. And yeah, so she describes basically in the documentary that I watched with her that the doctors basically hacked away at her clitoris, and then until there was nothing left. And she felt so bad and so depressed about her body and what they did to her, that she really had like suicidal thoughts and did not feel comfortable in her skin. And it took her a while to recover from this. So as I said before, these experiences, they can be extremely traumatic for people. So I think that if these surgeries aren't, if there's no imminent health risk, I think it's extremely unnecessary to perform these procedures, which can so negatively impact the child's mental health. And so the next case I'll be discussing is a girl named Bianca. This was also in the documentary Secret Intersex. And basically Bianca has CAH, which is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And as a result of this, the adrenal glands on top of her kidneys don't function properly, so her body produces damaging levels of testosterone. So even though genotypically she has XX chromosomes and she's a girl, phenotypically she appeared to be a bit more masculine, and she developed an enlarged clitoris, as you can see below. And so she has a womb and she has ovaries, but her vagina also didn't fully form. And basically what they did was they reconstructed her vagina, and then instead of removing her clitoris and cutting it off, they basically tucked it away and packeted it away into the vagina, so that when she gets older, she can decide for herself whether she wants to get the clitoris removed or not. And in the documentary, I remember her mother was discussing how she thinks that this surgery will make Bianca feel more normal, quote unquote. And her mom was concerned that she wouldn't be able to fit in and that she would be alienated from society. So that's why they chose to undergo this procedure. And in my opinion, I think that it was still unnecessary. I don't think they had to do this because it was still an invasive procedure. At least they didn't remove the clitoris as they often do with clitorectomies, and they just packeted it away into the vagina so she could decide for herself later on in life if she wants it removed or not. But I still think it was an unnecessary procedure, and I don't think it was made from a entirely like rational perspective, because normal, I think it's normal changes all the time, and there's so many variations of ways in which a person could be, that I think it was unnecessary to perform this procedure just because the mom wanted her child to be more normal. So this is Bianca's case. And then the next situation that I want to discuss is the nature versus nurture debate. So basically, in the 1950s, Johns Hopkins University created a team and became the first medical center to offer an organized multidisciplinary approach to intersex, one that sought to essentially eliminate intersex in early childhood. And they created this optimum gender of rearing model. And Johns Hopkins, he was basically the main leader of this. And what this model said was that each child's potential for a normal gender identity should be maximized by making each child's body, upbringing, and mind align as much as possible, because of the belief that it was harder to surgically engineer a boy than a girl. So they would say things like, it's easier to build a pole than to it's easier to poke a hole than to build a pole. So they would say, like, it's easier to engineer a girl than it is to engineer a boy via surgery. Most of the children with intersex, they were made as feminine as possible, and they utilized surgery, endocrinology, and psychology to do this. And ultimately, one of the quotes that John Money said was that a child could be successful in either gender role if the child received adequate socialization and information. And in relation to this, actually, a very sad, it's very depressing case. It's about David Reimer. So essentially, David Reimer was born, he and his brother was born in Canada in 1965, and he was born Bruce Reimer, and his twin brother's name is Brian Reimer. So Bruce and Brian Reimer were born in Canada in 1965, and they had a condition called phimosis. And essentially what that is that's when the foreskin of the penis cannot be retracted. And what they do for this is they typically do circumcision. And what they did was they tried to circumcise Bruce's penis, but what happened was that the machinery malfunctioned and his penis ended up being burnt off. So he basically had no penis left at all. And then afterwards, he was returned to his parents, and his parents were shocked. They didn't know what to do. And so they did research, and they found John Money, which is the psychologist that I described previously, who created this optimum gender rearing model. And John Money basically said that because, as I stated previously, they believed at the time it was easier to engineer a girl than it was to engineer a boy. They said that Bruce should become a girl. And so that's what they did. They made Bruce a girl, and they named Bruce Brenda. And then basically Brenda and her brother Brian would constantly attend different meetings with John Money, where he would try to convince Brenda that she is indeed a girl, because she didn't feel right in her skin, but this is what she was told. So this is what they did. And there were things in the documentary that I watched about this, that David Reimer said that when he was a girl, when he was Brenda, and he attended these meetings with John Money would have them do things like he would have them stripped naked in front of each other. And he would point out that, see, Brenda, your brother Brian has a penis. That's why he's a boy. And you don't have a penis. That's why you're a girl. So he would try to do those kinds of things to convince Brenda that she was indeed a female. Also, he would show them pictures of naked babies and point out the anatomy of their bodies for them as well, and other different horrific things that he would do. And it was very traumatizing for them. And as I said before, Brenda ended up feeling completely not in her own skin. She was so alienated. She didn't feel like she belonged with the girls because she didn't want to play with the games that they were playing. She didn't feel like she belonged with the guys. And she just felt very different and uncomfortable in her own skin. And she was literally got to the point where she was thinking that she was crazy, and she became suicidal. And so at that point, at age 13, when she became suicidal, her parents finally said that enough is enough, and they told Brenda that she was a boy. And in the documentary, David Reimer was explaining how after he found out that he was in fact a boy, he cried, because that was a relief. It was like it was validified that the fact that he wasn't going crazy. He was indeed, his feelings of feeling as if he didn't belong in his body were valid. And however, unfortunately, due to all of this trauma that both of these brothers experienced, David and Brian, Brian actually, he ended up developing schizophrenia, and then he died of drug overdose. And then afterwards, I think a year or two later, David, who got a divorce with his wife, he ended up committing suicide. So he killed himself as well at age 38. And so it really shows, I think, this case, it's very depressing and very upsetting, but it really shows how sometimes a physician who is 100% certain that they're right, how this one wrong decision, how it can really negatively impact a child's life forever, and how damaging it can be. And that's why I think that all of these invasive procedures, they can't be taken lightly, because down the road, there could be so many issues that could result as a result of them. And so ending non-consensual surgeries. So basically, the idea is what we have to do is we have to end these male and female norms, because ultimately gender exists on a spectrum. And intersex is proof of the fact that there is a plethora of gradations from just being male and female. There's something in between. And so that is why we have to end that norm. And also, we have to ask the most important question of necessity. Is there a problem? Specifically with the intersex conditions, very oftentimes, the flaw doesn't lie with the intersex condition. It lies with the standards that our society has. And also, there isn't any imminent health risk most of the time. As I said, with abdominal testes, for instance, even there isn't an imminent health risk. Yes, there's a health risk down the line that you may develop cancer, that those testes may become cancerous, but you don't have to make the choice right away. You could wait until later on when the child has matured, so the child can reach the decision themselves. And also, there's reimbursement for surgeons, but there's not for psychologists and social workers and geneticists. So there's a lot of emphasis on the surgery aspect of this when it comes to intersex, but there isn't enough emphasis on psychologists and social workers who could really help these kids as well, accept themselves the way they are, and feel included and loved. So,
Irene, I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of such a really interesting and important conversation, but we are at time. So do you have maybe one more conclusion that you want to bring to the audience, and then we'll come back to you for Q&A, just so we can make sure we fit everyone?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The next slides basically just discuss like the different things that several countries did. For instance, that were well, these are like bad things, but then the next slides discuss progress and hope, such as Malta, which was banned medically necessary surgery involving genitals of intersex infants, and other areas of the world that did that. And then, yeah, a disappointment was that there was a bill in California that was, they tried to pass this bill that would end non-consensual surgeries in California, but then doctors said that the medical decisions should be left up to parents and physicians, and other individuals stated that it was too broad, so they ended up canceling this bill. So that is an upsetting case. But the conclusion of my presentation, well, these are different intersex support groups, but the very conclusion of our presentation is that fire can warm or consume, water can quench or drown, wind can caress or cut, and so it is with human relationships, that we can both create and destroy, nurture and terrorize, traumatize and heal each other. And basically, I feel like it's really true, because I think that people, as much as they can help others, they can also harm other individuals. And I think ultimately, us as a society and as individuals, we should strive to make people feel comfortable and accept that this is the way they are and feel good in their own skin. So yeah, that concludes my presentation. Yeah, sorry it took so long.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for Irene. Thank you. I didn't mean to, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we want to make sure we fit everyone else. And if we have time in the broader Q&A, you certainly can come back to some of that stuff that you had to rush through. And it's really, really important conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
so if anyone has any questions for Irene, please feel free to write them in the chat or just hold on to them until we get to Q&A. Our next presenter is going to be Brooke Dominello from Post University, who's going to be talking to us about finding a voice for women in science, speaking truth to sexism in, is it the United States? In STEM careers.
STEM
careers. Sorry, I had it. It was just cut off. All right,
That's
go ahead.
Okay.
Take it away, please.
Okay, so welcome. My name is Brooke Dominello. I'm a senior here at Post University. I double major in equine studies and biology with a minor in chemistry. I'm not going to be displaying a PowerPoint, as I'm hoping to make this discussion as conversational as possible. So I encourage you all to turn on your cameras. I'd love to see all of your faces, but it's okay if you don't want to. Thank you. So today I'm going to be discussing a topic that's very important to me and women alike. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and what your majors are. Perfect. So the year 2020 marked the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. Our country experienced pain, suffering, and heartbreak. The year 2021 will see reform. Women in particular have been faced with their own challenges. We, as women and supporters, must come together to advocate for reform for the unjust treatments seen in our modern STEM culture. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the acronym STEM, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Women are responsible for tremendous accomplishments. Where would we be without Marie Curie, the first female Nobel Prize winner and the pioneer of radioactive study? Dorothy Brown, the first Black female surgeon who later went on to fight for women's reproductive rights and the rights of people of color. Rosalind Franklin, whom first suggested that DNA existed in a helical form, whom did not receive credit for her work until after her death. The credit was stolen and awarded to her male counterparts, Watson and Crick. What about the Coltrane girls, who are essential to the isolation of uranium from the Manhattan Project? Or the Radium girls, better known as the Ghost Girls, who lost their lives painting dials during World War I? Where is the justice? The legacy of women is unlike anything else. Women in Western cultures are drastically underrepresented in STEM fields. Women make up 28% of the workforce in STEM fields. A recent study observed the responses of middle school aged children when asked to draw a mathematician or scientist. Girls were twice as likely to draw male figures than females. In younger children, boys and girls score equally in mathematics and science. As students move on to high school, the gender gap broadens. Girls are less likely to take on more advanced STEM classes than boys. A larger margin is seen with girls faced with race and social economic class issues. It is evident that boys and girls can score the same mark, yet there is a stereotype fostered to steer girls away from pursuing a career in STEM fields. There is no question that women are underrepresented in STEM fields. Women represent less than 20% of chemical engineers. Less than 15% of women are represented in the field of aerospace science. The average median salary for female chemist and material scientist is approximately $64,000 compared to their male counterparts who on average earn around $80,000 annually. Women in STEM careers do not earn equal wages compared to their male counterparts, even though they are equally qualified. Women in varying fields earn 86 to 93%, according to Pew Research Center. Black women earn 62% of a white man's salary, and Hispanic women earn 61% of the white man's salary. True gender equality may not be seen for another century, but we must act now, not only for the sake of ourselves, but for the sakes of our future daughters. We will be the generation to abolish gender injustice. The time is now, the future is women. And as we're closing this up, I would like to know how many of you are involved in STEM careers? Feel free to just say out loud. Or raise your hand, that's a good idea. Perfect. I love it. I'm just gonna look at the chat and see what our majors are. Am I okay to roll into discussion? Or should we, okay. Now I have a quick question,
Sorry,
whether you're a
go
student
right ahead. You have, we're only 4 minutes into your presentation. So there's plenty of time for some Q&A now. And then of course, when we wrap it up, there'll be time for broader discussion. So yeah, please.
Perfect. I was hoping to make this really conversational. Now, whether you're a student or faculty, I was wondering what your schools do for female students on your campus. Feel free to raise your hand, say out loud, type it in the chat.
My school personally does a lot for female students. We have many clubs. I'm personally part of Evolve, which is a club that kind of encourages women to push for progress in their society as well as their community. And I feel like there's multiple branches of that. There's multiple things like that. And a lot of times the leaders of our class are really women.
I love to hear that. My campus is also very supporting. I myself am in the STEM field, so I will be graduating this May and I'm moving on to attend veterinary school this June. So I have been working in the veterinary field for about 2 years now, and I've definitely noticed that there has been some biases against me being a woman. I do have someone else who I work with who is a male. We're equal interns, and I often find that clients treat us differently. I'm not sure if anyone had personal experiences they wanted to talk about. You don't need to if you don't want to. But my personal self, I remember an instance, it didn't happen too long ago. It was only a few weeks ago, but I was cleaning up a room after a patient and a client made the comment that I would make a very good housewife one day. And my male counterpart, who was the other intern, he's never received any sorts of comments like that. I don't know if anyone else has things they'd like to speak on, personal experiences. It's all right if you don't. Um,
I can offer something.
oh yeah,
As a white male, but
that's
I
okay.
will tell you, I've been on the opposite side of this, so I can certainly say, you know, me and my wife are both in education, and I'm, you know, whenever I'm with my son, I'm babysitting, or I'm, you know, it's always like, oh my God, what a great father, because you're staying at home. I'm not, this isn't about STEM specifically, but I'm talking about just general sexism in the culture that we live in. I'm like, no, I'm parenting. I'm not babysitting my child. I'm parenting my child because we're co-partners in this relationship that we have. And, you know, and no one ever says that to my wife. No one ever says, oh, wow, you're spending the day with your kid. What a great mom. Like, it's just such an, you know, it's like the expectation of what a mom is supposed to do and versus what a dad is supposed to do. And so I totally hear that. And I'll tell you, most of my mentors at the graduate and undergraduate level have been women. And I'm a better scientist for that. I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in because without their mentorship. And, you know, I won't take up the whole conversation, but I absolutely hear what you're saying. And I think it's, you know, absolutely critically important that we get this right, for sure.
No, I agree with that. Some of my own friends have experienced that. A lot of my own friends do have their own children, and I've noticed that some of my female friends are so grateful that their fathers will take on parenting roles they already should be. I've recently done a literature review on racism and sexism in the veterinary fields, and a big pressure on women in veterinary medicine is familial pressure. A lot of time females take on part-time roles or roles of less authority because they also have to worry about their family, while males don't, which I don't find to be fair. Linda, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I'm Linda, and I'm director of the honors program at Post University. And when Brooke was preparing and we were talking about this topic, I recalled back in the day when I was working in what then was a non-traditional field for women, and that I had to do a lot of business traveling. And I was, you know, on a business trip. I was on an airplane, and gentleman sat down next to me, and I had on my business suit, and I had on my briefcase and everything. And there were not a whole lot of women on this particular flight. It was an early morning business flight. And so, you know, we got off and we started, you know, chatting a little bit. And he said to me, oh, are you going to visit family? No, I'm on business, and you know, I'll be gone for about a week on this trip. There was a pause. And I had on a wedding ring, and he looked down and took note of that. And he said, well, what does your husband think about you traveling? And I paused for a moment, looked over, saw that he had on a wedding ring, smiled, and said to him, and what does your wife think about your traveling? And so it's, you know, these subtle kinds of things that as professional women, we've had to deal with for a very long time. And although there has been progress made, as Brooke points out, we have a long way to go.
Last month was March was Women's Month, and I saw an interesting post on my LinkedIn feed from a veterinary technician. It's a really good quote that stuck with me. It's for supporting other women. It's hard to see yourself where there's not other people like you. So I encourage everyone to keep striving, whatever field they are, be the best person that you can be, and others will follow. We just need to be leaders. And I see.
I was gonna point you to the chat. Justin has talked to us, and I think if you could help make that connection, how even sometimes women, especially in previous generations, can be in some ways subversive to you know, subsequent generations, because I think that's the heart of what he's getting at there.
No, yeah, I myself have not experienced that, but I have talked to my grandmother. So I am moving on to professional school, and I do talk with her, and it makes me sad when she tells me that she wanted to go on to go to college, to do great things, do accounting, and she just couldn't because of how times were. And it always just makes me so sad when she tells me how sad she never got to do what she really wanted to do. Does anyone else want to contribute anything? Anything they want to bring up? Any questions?
So can I also mention something?
Yeah, I love it.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, for my family, like specifically, my family always encouraged me to like pursue biology, and like they really encouraged me to do medicine. I'm still not 100% sure like the career path I want, but my grandmother, she was in public health like back in the Soviet Union, and so like they really like encouraged me to do that. But I do like right now, like I work as a physical therapy aide, and sometimes like some patients they're like, oh, like you better find yourself like a good husband, or like, you know, comments kind of like that. And I mean, I don't mind it so much, but it does sometimes make me feel a bit gross, because like I feel like is like that if that's like the only expectation that like you can envision like a woman having, or like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like that kind of makes me feel a bit like degraded almost. So that was like, I guess, my relation. And then another one is like one of my favorite authors, Victoria Schwab. She would write like V.E. Schwab on the front cover, because that way people wouldn't know if she was female or male. So because there's like that kind of stereotype that I guess like female authors can't write as like deep of novels or things like that. So, and I don't know, I thought that was like I really see that as well, like in society, like that there's that bias. And I think that's kind of unfortunate that that's like how things are.
No, I understand where you're coming from. A lot of times when we have clients that have larger dogs, or we're working with cows or other livestock, it's always the male client who tries to step in and doesn't know with how much power you have, but with technique. So I definitely understand the side comments and how they can kind of build up, and it just makes you feel, you just, and then I see Tyler posted in the chat.
And Aaron as well, talking about
Yep.
writing and fiction, and especially science fiction, which is definitely a male-dominated space in fiction writing for sure.
Tyler, I also work in retail. So I have a lot of jobs. So I also work in retail, and I work with financing type contracts. And a lot of times when I call in a contract, I will get denied. So I have one of my male coworkers call it in, and all of a sudden it's approved. So I kind of understand where that's coming from as well. We can move on if you'd like to. I think I'm good with leaving the discussion here. Everyone had really good input.
Great, that's perfect, because that's right on time, and that means we have plenty of time for Ezinne. And then
Excited.
once that's done, we will absolutely open it up for a broader discussion for everyone. So next up is Ezinne, who's going to talk to us about the perpetuation of rape culture in American society, and she's from Morgan State University. Take it away.
Do you guys hear the sound of my computer? I wasn't sure if that's how it worked. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully you guys hear this video.
There's no sound. Could you turn the captions on maybe?
Put Molly all in her champagne. She ain't even know it. I took her home and I enjoyed that. She ain't even know it.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just grab.
I shouldn't be there.
So, as you could have guessed from that video, if you guys heard it for the most part, my presentation is on rape culture in American society. And the first thing I wanted to do is ask you guys, did you guys get anything out of those videos? Any subliminal messages or anything like that?
Yes, I understand what we're talking about.
So I don't know, what could you guys pick out of any of those videos? And, you know, were those videos that you at one time, you know, were very okay with, that you enjoyed at one point?
I think they just show like the objectification of women. And
Second
I
that.
know like I forgot how the song is called, where he's saying like, you're a good girl, like that singer. Yeah, I know. I feel like, I don't know. I don't like that music video. I also don't particularly like that song. I think it's very like, it does objectify women a lot, and I don't really like that. So yeah, I think that's like the general gist of what I got from the video.
Well, yes, pretty much the object of the video, or the subject of the video, was the objectification of women, but it's really the idea that it's permitted in society. Most of those lyrics centered around actually raping women, but people saying those things, and, you know, we even glorified them because we believed that, you know, it was the norm. Jamie Foxx's video was talking about alcohol, and, you know, how people cannot technically give consent, but they were just going to go with it and just blame it on the alcohol. And then, you know, moving on, Robin Thicke was talking about, you know, he had to come into a girl's life and show her, even though she was a good girl, that he had to show her who she really is. So what is rape culture? Rape culture is defined as an environment in which actions and attitudes are normalized. Well, actions and attitudes normalize the prevalence of sexual violence and harassment. So the effects of rape culture are that it normalizes sexual violence. It creates the idea that rape is inevitable. So meaning that like they feel like it's going to happen regardless. So it's just like it's a thing that we kind of just have to live with. Also, it perpetuates the idea that only women can be rape victims. It limits rape to women, and they feel like rape and women they just kind of go together. It puts shames on the victim rather than the perpetrator. It makes people feel like, you know, it's inevitable. It makes people feel like it's inevitable, but it's like, why did it have to be you? It creates a system of oppression for just really everybody involved. So some statistics that go around, you know, this topic are that sexual assault occurs around every 73 seconds in the United States. So since I began this presentation, probably 2, you know, sexual assaults or more have, you know, happened in that time frame, going off this statistic. Also, 1 in 6 women are either rape victims or victims of attempted rape, and 1 in 33 men are either rape victims or, you know, victims of attempted rape. And with these numbers, we kind of just think, okay, well, these are just, you know, different cases. But what we have to realize is that these are people, and that every single number counts. Even though it's 1 in 33 men, that's millions of men around the world. That's millions of women around the world that are going through this often. And I feel like we minimize it because, you know, it's just the norm. We feel like it's inevitable. People are just gonna get raped, just like people will die one day. People are gonna be born, and it really shouldn't just be the norm. So the first part to, you know, combating rape culture would be to understand the levels and how it actually works. So this is a perfect diagram that shows how small, you know, small actions on, you know, the personal level can lead to bigger consequences like rape, drugging, molestation, harassment, all of those things. So I would just like everybody to just take a minute and just look at the bottom of the spectrum. Things like sexist attitudes, rape jokes, locker room banter, for example, the one that was shown in the video with Donald Trump. These small things that are, you know, normalized in our society that really do encourage the behaviors that, you know, affect people on the larger scale, like rape, molestation, and the things that I've already named. So it's kind of like there's an upward slope, and it's just like one thing leads to another. If we let this go on the lower level, it's going to go on and affect people on the higher level. Okay, and then rape culture is not just limited to social implications. It also leaks into the rest of our social aspects. It leaks into different institutions that we have built as a society. For example, our judicial system. People do not report rapes because they feel like the justice system won't actually have their back and that they will not be actually fought for. They won't have their justice. So a lot of times the rape cases either are not reported or they do report it and it's not investigated, or it is investigated and prosecutors just refuse to take the case up to another level, or the rape case goes to trials, but the survivors are re-traumatized and subjected to many different questions and they don't even understand why they're even doing this anymore. And then people continue to put these, judgments on them, and it continues to make them feel like, am I making this up? Am I even supposed to be here right now? Should I even be doing this? Should I even be speaking up about my truth? And then even after all of that, a lot of times they are not prosecuted. This statistic says that only 3% of rapists spend even a day in jail, which is very discouraging to those that are, fighting for justice for themselves, because it's the idea that you will put yourself on the line, you will be shamed, and the only repercussion that they will get is possibly jail time. And even then, it's most likely that they won't even do that. So you'll probably have to walk the same streets as your rapist. And that is the case for a lot of people. So being a bystander, what do you guys think a bystander is, or what would you define as a bystander?
I can, do we need to raise hands?
Anybody.
Okay. So a bystander would be someone who witnessed or knows about what happened, but does nothing, and the bystander effect.
Yep. Anybody else?
Well, I watched like a movie called Promising Young Woman. I don't know if you guys seen it, but it's kind
I
of
watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is about rape, and I think like the girl, the main character, who was dating I think her name was Cassie. Who was dating like the guy, he was a bystander to the rape of her friend. Like he was present there while they were filming her getting raped, and he didn't do anything. He was just laughing and drinking. So I think that is what a bystander is.
I'm glad that, you guys understand what a bystander is, and you kind of, put a good amount of blame on them, even though, this purpose of this is not to blame, but you understand that they have some responsibility in this situation. So I like how Brooke actually talked about the bystander effect, which is a perfect segue into the next thing. It's a phenomenon in which a greater number of people are present, but they are not likely to actually intervene in the situation that they are witnessing. And people have testified that they often, reserve themselves, or they don't intervene, even though they see people in distress, even though they see a lot of things going wrong, because of societal pressures, meaning they didn't feel like they were the person to step in. They felt like it wasn't their place, or they felt like someone else can do it. Like, why does it have to be me? Or personal conflict, like, oh, what if I put myself on the line and I end up hurt? And people just kind of, feel like they'd rather feel personally, like, socially correct rather than just doing the right thing. So this goes directly with victim blaming. So people, they're bystanders, and they feel like, this is kind of like the fault of the victim. They should get themselves out of this situation because I wouldn't be in this situation. So victim blaming is the act of placing fault on a victim rather than the rapist. It's the idea that they're just like, well, why did you get yourself in that situation anyways? Why, is it you and not me type thing? And this pressure puts victims in a place where they have to keep quiet, or they feel like they have to keep the peace rather than, rivaling riling everybody up and making them feel like, oh yeah, hey, look at me, listen to the situation. They feel like they don't want the attention on them, especially because it's going to be most likely negative attention. And it goes around with asking all the wrong questions. So people will ask things like, was she promiscuous? What was she wearing? How could she have gotten out of this? Why her? If anybody, why wasn't it anybody else? Because they want to just feel like it's you, so that they feel like there's no risk of me being in the situation, because they don't realize the sad reality of the world is it could be anybody, but they feel like they have a power if they say, no, you're just different. It would never be me. And this leads to people brushing off allegations. So this is a list of things that perpetuate rape culture, and that is language that glorifies sexual assault, sexism, inflated false reports, and rape reports, negative gender roles, toxic masculinity, certain content displayed in movies and music. And these are just the like tip of the iceberg of the things that we do in society that kind of just pushes the narrative that sexual assault is okay and that it should just be excused in one way or another. So we are all, college students. So I feel like it's important that we touch on rape culture in college campuses. A statistic says that 26.4% of females or 6.8% of males experience sexual assault or rape, especially on a college campus. Desensitizing this concept happens through slang and jokes, and it's normalized in our society because we just feel like, well, if we can't beat it, kind of just join it. It's just like, you might as well get used to the idea of it. Also, rape on college campuses surround around questionable consent that might be through coercion or inebriation. And coercion is kind of a topic that has been spoken about more often nowadays than it was even when I was younger and things like that. So coercion centers around people feeling like they don't have a choice. They don't have the ability to say no, so they don't. And inebriated consent is more like when you are under the influence of alcohol or drugs and you just feel like, you don't actually have control over yourself. And this centers around fraternities and things like that. Many people have given like experiences in which they went to like a frat house and things like that, and they were raped or they were inebriated and they, had sex and they don't remember the whole situation. So also we want to talk about toxic masculinity as we talk about this so that we can understand one of the key contributors, the idea that boys will be boys, the pressure to put men in a dominant situation, making them feel like if you're not strong and dominant, you're not a man. Also teaching women to cover up rather than men not to rape. They'll say, put some clothes on, you don't want to get raped. And they don't realize that what if we just teach our boys and are taught our boys, hey, just don't rape women. Don't look at women like that. Don't do that. So the pressure is more on the woman to actually make these things right, but they also have a pressure on the man to be dominant and kind of do more. They feel like if you're not scoring or you're not dominant, you're not less of a man. They feel like if you like say you're a virgin or you choose to actually wait for women when they're ready, you just seem like you're soft or something. So the way that we can change this on the societal level is to glorify the idea of enthusiastic consent. As I've already spoken on before, questionable consent is not consent. Also, is to acknowledge the roots of the causes. So those lower levels that I explained, like the slang, the jokes, the music, everything, it should no longer be allowed. It should no longer be a thing that we take so lightly. We should be very vigilant in our lives and everything we do. We should change the way society views masculinity. We should stop blaming victims, and we should have no tolerance, and we should always be an active bystander. There's no reason for you to be sitting watching injustice and you sit there. And how can you help? I don't know. I kind of wanted to leave this up to you guys. Like, what do you think that you could possibly do to change this situation? Anybody can answer.
Well, I think like you said, like if we see that something bad is occurring, that someone is in danger of getting raped, or that there's just like, for instance, like someone is placing a hand on someone and that person is putting that hand like elsewhere, like saying like, no, like don't do that, to get involved and stop that from occurring. I think that's very important. Because like you said, like I think like the bystanders, like even though you're not the one doing the act, if you're just standing there and witnessing like an injustice happening, I think that's almost just as bad.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think access for certain tools on campus is really important for students. On my campus personally, I know the Title IX director is very accessible. She's like near the lunchroom. She's a very easy spot to access. And something that's fairly new on our campus, it's been there for a few years, is we have these blue emergency type lights. I've actually seen them on other campuses as well, where if there's some sort of problem, you could press the blue light and it brings security. So I think having some sort of physical tools as well tends to help.
I agree. We also our schools. So we are allowed to call the escorts if we wanted a ride home, or we felt like, some people are drunk or things like that, rather than, staying at that guy's house or staying in other people's dorms or things like that. We have a system in which it's like, if you feel like you're unsafe, you can call the escort system and they'll take you back to your dorm.
There are some great suggestions in the chat as well. I don't know, Ezinne, if you had a chance to look.
Oh,
Erin,
okay, yeah, I see it.
there's Tyler.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I see it. Erin, that is really a good one. I'm glad that you take that initiative to shut people down and not just allow that to happen. A lot of times we let it slide. And like I said, that's that hierarchy. It starts there. And then if you let that go, it just kind of goes upward from there. Also, Tyler, yes. And then unfortunately, you are, I'm not going to say it's unfortunate to be a man, but unfortunately, yes, men have some type of responsibility in this. And, perpetuating stereotypes and making themselves feel like they have to be a certain thing. That's where they play this role. I feel like a lot of the stereotypes or those toxic masculinity that men are subject to is of their own doing. I definitely agree with everything that's said. And Tyler also spoke on, how the music industry is corrupt and how we normalize these things. We were singing these out loud, even as little kids. Like when I was little, I was singing all of these songs and I didn't realize, the magnitude of it. And it's really crazy, but I'm glad that we are all open to it and we all understand and we can kind of just be vigilant. So all good suggestions, and just thank you guys for speaking on this. And I'm glad I got to speak to you guys about it.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. And congratulations to all three of our presenters. We have plenty of time for questions. So does anyone have any further specific questions for Ezinne? If not, feel free to open it up for discussion for the rest of our panelists who have been all fantastic. It's been a really great discussion so far. I'm happy to ask more questions. So
Thank you, Julia.
But as moderator, I don't want to butt in too much. So if there's, does anyone have something they want to ask?
I have a comment, not necessarily a question. I really liked what Tyler said. I really want to stress that all movements, everything here discussed today, it's not an anti-men thing. I never, especially when I was coming up with my topic and how I wanted to write, I never wanted to be anti-men. We need to support women is the gist of it. We need to support everyone, really. I think we should all be held to the same standards of equality and equity. I don't know if anyone wanted to jump in on this conversation.
I agree 100. I feel like it is necessary to, hold each other accountable. And we're not against each other. Rather, we can work together so that we can break the system. The enemy is the system, not each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also agree. I was gonna say, even from in regards to my intersex presentation, I wasn't trying to vilify parents also who of intersex kids. I think because there is a generational difference, so I understand why they may think that way. I was just trying to point out the flaws in their thinking mostly and how it could be fixed. So I guess they kind of along the same lines.
No, I definitely agree with you. I definitely, in all aspects of my life, I see the generational differences of thinking when it comes to no matter what the topic is. And I definitely agree with the point you made. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, I liked your presentation too. I think all the presentations were super good.
I know, I'm so sad we couldn't be in person. I love seeing everyone's faces and the conference and the noise. Oh, I miss it so much.
Yeah, I think I miss it too, but this doesn't have to be a zero-sum thing where supporting women takes away is hurting men. That conversation is and I'm not any of us here, but in broader society, it's often perceived that way, and it's bizarre to me that standing up for one thing is taking away from someone else. It's not. It doesn't add up that way. It doesn't need. It's ridiculous. But I actually have a couple of questions. Does anyone have any other questions or comments that they'd like to bring up, because I don't want to take away from this conversation.
I have a question for Irene. At what age is the surgery typically done?
I'm actually not 100% sure like the specific age. I think like some of the cases that I looked at, for instance, like with PIDGEON PAGONIS, I'm pretty sure at like around 6 or 3, they were already analyzing her body parts and trying to perform some of these procedures. So when she was fairly young, she didn't even realize, like she would just go to the doctor's office and they would do these things to her, but she didn't understand like what they were doing. Other like TED Talks that I watched of intersex individuals, they point out the same things, that at a very young age, these procedures were done to them. So like before like they were even 10 years old, like these procedures would start getting done to them. And how like the TED Talk that I watched actually with Emily Quinton, I think was her name, she said that she has androgen sensitivity syndrome, so she has abdominal testes, and the doctors, they didn't even tell her that she was intersex. They would just tell her that, oh, you have XY chromosomes, oh, you have abdominal testes, and like this has to happen like for you to be more normal, like we have to remove your abdominal testes for you to be more normal and stuff like that. And she said that once they had health class in school, when she found out that like XY was man and XX was female, she came home and cried about it because she was like so confused. So yeah, I think it's just horrific, like what they do to kids. Like, as I said, like, I think if it's not an imminent health risk, I just don't see how you can rationally like choose to undergo that procedure, or I mean, like have your kid undergo that procedure. Yeah.
A question for Irene. I feel, I don't know how to phrase this, but do you feel like there's a possibility that if they keep their original sexual organs, do you think that there might be repercussions to that? Or I already know that you said that there are health implications, but do you think that their mental health will be intact completely? Or did you do any study, and did you find any research on that?
That's actually a really good question. I'm not sure if I'm like 100% qualified to give like a really accurate answer. I think like from the cases I observed, even because you still kind of feel different, right? Like with the way that you are because of the standards that our society creates. Even like the girls that from the documentary that didn't undergo those procedures, I mean, they reached a point because of the way they were raised and their parents were very cool and provided unconditional love that they were fine, but even they kind of felt a little bit alienated in some points. So I think it could still be very difficult to sort of accept that this is like the way they are. And like Emily Quinton, like in her TED Talk, she explained also that she was having like she still felt like mentally like she was in pain as well, but she reached a healthy stage in her life where she accepted herself like the way she is. So yeah, but I do think that either way, like you will still sort of you will still be impacted by like the situation and like either way, but it's like the way you come out of it. And some things like as like the surgeries, like they're so damaging that that's like far worse than if you choose not to perform it and then let the individual decide for themselves. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. I feel like it's a thing of autonomy, is the ability to, decide for yourself. So even if I do feel some type of way for the entirety of my life, at least I know that this was my choice.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question as well. Now I'm kind of interested. So if surgery is not done on an infant and you wait, at what point, I don't know if you can answer this, but at what point in your research have you thought what is the age of consent that the child would they need to legally be an adult, or is there something that should be intervened prior to them hitting puberty? I guess it depends on which sort of disorder they have, but I didn't know what your thoughts were on this, if people were allowed to decide at what age of consent is typically accepted.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, actually, like in like the Senate Bill 201, which was they were trying to pass in California to end non-consensual surgeries, but then that bill didn't end up getting passed. That was actually raised like that concern of when can they really consent. I don't think they reached like a great conclusion, like at like an end conclusion for that, but I think that age of consent mostly what that they're referring to like in the documentaries is like when you're a teenager. Because when you're a teenager, like you could get a better understanding of like the situation of your health risks and your anatomy. But even when you're like younger, I think you can still consent. There's just that also I guess like a concern that what if you're like kind of pushed into giving an answer like by your parents or I guess by your surroundings that isn't actually what you want, but like kind of you're influenced by the society to provide like a specific answer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now is there I don't know if you know this either, but are there hormone blockers that can be given to children until they reach a legal age of consent, so they're not going through puberty one way or the other if they still have time to decide?
I actually didn't look into that, so I'm not sure, but I could definitely double check that and get back to you. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I was definitely curious. I just touched on this topic a little bit in developmental like 2 weeks ago, so I just found it very interesting, and I'm glad that we did that before I came here.
Mhm.
Tyler in the chat has some insight on this. But I also don't know the answer specifically, but my understanding is generally what Tyler has said.
Oh, I actually had like a question. Is it okay if I ask? I was wondering like what your opinions are on raising a child as gender neutral, like being that there are all of these problems and like that you could be like intersex and there's like a plethora of gradations. I was just wondering what your guys' opinion was.
Have you seen the video? Was it called X Baby or Gender X?
Yeah, I think I watched that. I watched like also a video of a baby named Gray.
Mhm.
It was on YouTube. Mhm.
Well, if you're looking for personal opinions, I need a second to think.
I personally feel like it's whatever the child wants. So I feel like you shouldn't force them to be gender neutral. So if like they're a girl or a boy and they feel like I want to explore, this side. I want to be a girl. I want to have a doll. I want to run around and play in a dress. I feel like you shouldn't, force them. I feel like it's just like whatever vibe they give you. So it's just like whatever they do, encourage it, especially because it's not going to be harmful. I feel like they should be able to just, go wherever they want. It doesn't have to always just be like, oh yeah, wear beige. You know what I'm saying? It could be whatever the child wants. If they feel like being anything today. And I feel like what they do shouldn't technically classify their gender anyways. So yeah.
I think it kind of breaks into ethical and cultural norms. I know this is really a hot topic in ethics, especially with the new trend of gender reveals. I found that it was even more of a hot topic, but I think it really depends on first what your culture is. Our Western culture is much different than others. And I think it kind of comes down to more of a private, so to speak. Like if I had a child, I wouldn't tell another parent how to raise their child as long as everything was the child isn't being harmed, so to speak, not physically or mentally. I like to keep in my own little box as long as everything's doing well. Personally, I would let my child freely express themselves as long as no one was being harmed. I definitely agree. I don't see any issue in restricting what clothes they wear, what toys they play with. I think I saw an article about merging the boys and girls toy section, which I think is interesting. Children should be able to play with what they want. I don't think at such a young age they should have the weight of societal norms of what their gender should do. If you get what I'm saying with that, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
When they canceled the potato heads, does anyone remember this most recently? It was I can't even say it because it's so ridiculous. Hasbro is the company that makes the potato heads, and the company made the decision to not call it Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head anymore. They just are marketing, even though they come with all the same pieces, like there's still the mustache and the lip and whatever, all that stuff. They just changed it to the potato heads, and there was all this, backlash against it, that cancel culture and all this other,
No, yep, I know what you're saying. And I definitely think there's extreme things. There's extremist views to it. I personally don't agree with stopping calling him Mr. Potato Head, as he is a toy and it's a potato. I just think there's some things that are a little bit extreme and a little bit much that we could just leave alone because he's a plastic potato.
I agree. I feel like there are drastic measures. I believe I feel like everybody should just do what they want and leave everybody else alone. I think my sister had a conversation about banishing gender when it came to certificates. Like, how like birth certificates, when it says like it's a boy and things like that, not like the actual birth certificate, but like the little things that they give you when you get home with the child's footprints on it, and it's like it's a boy and they'll have different colors. I felt like that's a thing of joy to some people, so I feel like abolishing it is not really fair. I feel like if the parent personally says, I don't want that, or I would like it to be a neutral thing, I feel like we could work with that. But I feel like the idea of taking it away from everybody because, some people don't, identify as that, or they don't fall into that category, I feel like it's just not fair. I feel like everybody should be able to have that freedom to choose.
I totally agree with that.
If I can offer a counter argument real quick, just with the Mr. Potato Head thing, I think, especially going back to merging the boys and girls toy sections, I think by calling it Potato Head, but then giving him all of the features to either make it a Mr. or a Mrs. or a, little girl or little boy, then you kind of open up the window, because you can still make Mr. Potato Head and you can still make Mrs. Potato Head. But from a marketing standpoint, you're not saying like boys and girls are making Mr. Potato Head. You're saying anyone can make, because like you said, it's a potato. It literally, like it doesn't have a gender at the end of the day. It's a crop.
Thank you, Tyler. I think that's a really great contribution.
To add on to that, I recently watched a TED Talk on the Easy Bake Oven. I don't know if any of you seen this TED Talk, and when you go into stores, most Easy Bake Ovens are targeted for girls. They're pink, they have flowers, they're purple, they're cute. And a child wrote in because her younger brother wanted to play with the Easy Bake Oven, and he was made fun of because it was pink and flowers. So actually, they came back and they made more so of a neutral Easy Bake Oven. It looks like a real oven. It's like black and gray. And when you buy an oven, you can get a black and gray oven or a pink and flowery one. And I thought that was an interesting thing. I personally would like the black and gray oven, but that's just me.
I feel like that's very nice. I agree that it's nice that we have the idea to choose, like I said. But I feel like as humans, we have to always define something. We always have to categorize something. And I feel like it's more divisive than, putting, I don't know how to describe it. It's more divisive than uniting. That's what it is. So it's unfortunate, but I feel like we should not really define. It's just like, just be, live.
Just be. Live and
Yes.
let live.
Yes.
I think there's a lot to, the difference between gender stereotypes versus gender identity. And, for example, my son, he will literally play with like army figures in a Frozen dress with his nails painted. And he'll tell me he's a boy. And that's great. Like you do, like you've all said, it's you do you. And no one's going to tell you what is appropriate and what's not if you're happy and you're safe and you're comfortable being who you are. And I think that's the heart of what all of you really were talking about today in different ways, but supporting each other, making sure we're all safe, having the right conversations with the people that need to hear it, and really, being proactive and supporting of each other. So we are out of time. I want to thank all of our presenters for this absolutely wonderful conversation, and all of our attendees for their excellent contributions. I wish we didn't have to cut this off because this has been a really great conversation. So one more round of applause for our presenters. You all did a fantastic job. You really did. And thank you so very much. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of the conference. We have our closing presentation at 11. So feel free to go get something to eat, have a bite of coffee, or no, you bite coffee? You know what I mean? Have a drink of coffee, unless I guess it's an ice cube of coffee. Don't eat it, not very good. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much. And congrats again to our student presenters. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all. Have a good one. It was great seeing everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.